Welcome to ND and Me, a podcast to share NDers' lived experiences. I'm Richard, an ND coach, mentor, accountability buddy, and business consultant. Morning, Vic. How are you?
Good morning, Richard. I'm very well, and you? Thanks.
Fantastic. So, talk to us about who Vic is.
That's a very complicated question, so I'll keep it very, very short. I'm Vic Williams. I grew up in South Africa. Now live here in the UK, down in Exeter, in Devon. And primarily right now, I run a business which is focused on people with dyslexia and ADHD, either who are self-employed, so entrepreneurs that have dyslexia or ADHD, but I also work with companies that have employees who have dyslexia and ADHD, because I have both conditions, and I kind of understand all the not just dyslexia and ADHD, but I understand all the associated consequences that come with that. And so I help companies to facilitate an environment in which they can communicate properly with their staff. They can get them to work at an optimal level so that they're highly productive. But then also I work with, as I said, entrepreneurs to help them deal with the consequences of their dyslexia or ADHD and then become highly productive around that place. So that's primarily what I do. I'm also an author, I'm a coach, and I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn doing all sorts of stuff. So probably in a nutshell, that's me.
It's amazing how many...
And I'm also an old bloke who likes to ride a skateboard.
I was going to bring up the skateboard question. It's amazing how many ADHDers do stuff.
Yes.
Indiscriminate stuff.
Yeah.
My most recent biz dev role, they were like, okay, so what's the strategic plan? And I was like, do stuff, sell stuff, make money.
Yeah.
Good, carry on.
Happy days. Here's my plan. It's written on the back of a fag packet, but it works for me.
Well, I know that the overheads are X, and I know that we want to make money.
Yes.
So how much money do we want to make? Okay, maybe 8 to 12%. Okay, well, that gives us a target of Y. Our average opportunity is X. Okay, well, how many of them do I need?
Yeah.
About 560. Cool. Where am I going to get them from?
It's a process of elimination. It's just you start with that, end with that. This is what I'm going to do, and that works for me.
Yeah, and that conversation about setting a goal so you've got something to aim at. And then you can decide whether or not it's the right goal, but at least you're moving rather than
Yeah, I think that's a problem for most people with dyslexia or ADHD, is that they either don't have a goal because they're too overwhelmed to try and put something together. There's kind of a whole lot of phases to it. One group of people that I've come across is that group of people who have read all this stuff and they've been on a whole lot of courses, typically delivered by or written by neurotypical people. So they write it in a way that works for them. And then you get the dyslexic or the ADHD person reading through this going, I could never do that. And so then they don't do anything. That's kind of the one group of people, and they just bumble along day by day. I was talking with somebody yesterday, and I said to them, so where do you want to be in a year's time? They said, well, I don't really know, but I know where I want to be by the end of today. Okay, well, that's not really going to give you much direction. So we'll work with them. But then there's that other group of people who've read through the stuff, or they've been on this course and they got this like template or something, and they're now trying to work through it, and it just the stuff that they're trying to do is counterintuitive. It doesn't work for them as a dyslexic or somebody with ADHD. And then there's the third group of people who've gone, that doesn't work for me. I'll create my own plan and I'll do it my way. And they just seem to rock it. And again, those are the people that I'm trying to help through this thing. Have you got a plan? What are you doing with it? Where are you going? All that sort of stuff. Yeah. So I can relate to that. Yeah.
Most recently, my to-do list is don't die. And I've been sharing that to-do list with my ill father.
Yes.
So it's like, look, you just have to do one thing today, not die.
Yeah, just keep it together.
And, if you've got 6 months of that, then hopefully your brain will be clear enough to then see where the future is. But for the next couple of weeks, just don't die.
Yeah.
And
that's a good thing to do. That's a good goal to have if you are if you're sick, or if you have a parent who is struggling with a condition. So I get that. Yeah.
But it's really funny. I'm undertaking a diploma in coaching and mentoring. And it was like, right, so what you need to do is this. Do some self-coaching, work through the models.
Yeah.
I was like, I've got so much going on in my head right now that trying to work out where I'm going to be in 2 weeks' time is a struggle, let alone a year. What I want to do is be in a position where I'm doing work that I enjoy doing whilst providing for my family. I don't really mind what that work is. And at the moment, that's with Lemonade, doing similar work to you in supporting individuals and organizations to not be dicks to each other.
That's a noble goal. There's far too many dicks out there.
Well, I can't remember what organization it was. I think it was Australian based. And so many organizations have like writing on the wall of their values and culture and compassion, care, kindness. Or care being an acronym with respect and excellence and and basically behind reception they painted the wall grey with big black lettering, "Don't be a dick." And I'm like, perfect.
Love it. Works for me. I came across a company a little while ago, and on their what do they call it when they initiate? Well, they're bringing a new person into the company. On their what do they call it?
Like induction paperwork.
Their onboarding process document. The very first thing it says, so it's got the company name, the person's name, and then just below that it says, "We have a no dick policy." If you don't understand what that is, then stop being one. And it was kind of, we have a no dick policy. If you don't understand what that is, stop being one. I now understand what a no dick policy is. And I just thought, a little bit cryptic, but kind of gets you thinking, And I think that's a brilliant thing to do. A lot of people, a lot of companies just accept garbage from their staff, and I'm like, no, we don't want that.
Yes. And then you realize that only something like 17% of autistic people have jobs, and about half of ADHD people are entrepreneurs. Okay, well, let it. Part of the work that I'm looking at establishing is redefining what garbage is and having a conversation about reasonable and acceptable behaviors.
Absolutely.
So I had a very interesting conversation with a lovely lady last night who's doing an MBA in neurodiversity and the impact of neurodiversity on criminal justice.
Oh wow!
So how many autistic and ADHD folk are in jail for their impulsive behaviors? Hang on a second. Why are we dealing with those people in the way that we're dealing with those people?
Absolutely.
Might it be better to deal with those people differently, therefore relieve the burden of all of those people in jail and give them better opportunities in life?
I came across, sorry to interrupt you there, Richard. I came across some studies a little while ago from the US, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was something like 82% of all prisoners in American prisons are dyslexic. I think it was 78% are ADHD, and like 45% are on the spectrum of autism, and that just freaked me out. So, that's a really good thing to do, to look into it and understand how to treat people differently. Why? I mean, just my own case. I look at guys that were at school with me, that couldn't read and write, just in the same way that I struggled with it. Obviously, you had dyslexia. Obviously, you had ADHD when you look back in hindsight. And obviously, hindsight is always 20/20 vision. But you look back at them and you go, they had those conditions, but they weren't diagnosed. And the way they were treated, and then I have a look at them today, and I can geez, I can literally put my finger on 5 of them because they're in prison or have been in prison.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't hack it at school because for obvious reasons. They never went on and got a job afterwards because the only option open to them was the criminal option. You know, and now maybe I should rephrase that. It wasn't the only option, but it was the only option they saw.
Or the easiest option.
Absolutely.
Hang on, I need to fill in an application form.
Nah, you've got to be kidding me. Well, again, coming back to that point, I was having a conversation with a recruiter the other day. And one of the things that I'm doing is I'm putting together a program to help recruiters properly recruit people that have got dyslexia or ADHD or on the spectrum. And as we were having this conversation, it became so clear to me that recruitment is kind of a formulaic process. You know, did I ask this question? Did I ask that question? Did I ask this question? You couldn't write. No, you haven't got the job. Kind of thing. Okay, it's like almost a tick box exercise. Everybody has to go through the scenario of, please, Richard, tell me when you last were in the role as a manager, how you dealt with X, Y, Z. Please write that out. Sorry, what? You know, you ask that of somebody that's got ADHD. Their brain is running at 1,000,000 miles an hour. They're as nervous as all heck. Now you ask them to describe the situation that they found themselves in. Or if this situation arose, how would you deal with it? Got no idea. I'll deal with it when I get to that situation. But because they can't answer the question in a way that ticks the box, they don't get the job. And that's why we got the statistics, like you said, half of people with ADHD are self-employed or entrepreneurs. Same is true with people with dyslexia and people with autism. The amount of people I'm coming across right now that are self-employed, working from home, in their back bedroom, whatever it is, that are autistic, it's unbelievable. Just purely because they can't get a job. Nobody wants to employ them because they don't tick that. So that's one thing I'm trying to, I'm putting a project in place so that we can tackle that issue because it is a huge, huge problem.
Yeah.
I remember going back years, sorry.
No, go for it.
I remember going back years to when I was joining the financial services industry back in South Africa. And they asked me to write a position paper of how I would engage with the client, what questions I would ask the client, how I would take notes. Now, this is back in the day before computers and laptops and tablets and all those sort of things. But even with that, with laptops or tablets, you've still got to type. You've still got to be able to communicate with that thing in a way that it understands. And they wanted me to write out this position paper. And I said to the guy, there's no way I'm doing that. I don't want the job. And that is the problem for so many people. All the forms you've got to fill in, all the questions you've got to go through. Instead of making it an environment in which somebody with dyslexia, somebody with ADHD feels comfortable, somebody with autism feels comfortable, they feel relaxed, they feel like, okay, I can do this in a way that works for me, and I can compete at the same level as everybody else, but in the way that works for me, which is simply not the case at the moment. You know, you can't write properly, you can't spell properly, you can't read properly. Go and sweep the floors. In reality.
Yeah. Well,
sorry, I just went off on one.
That's fine. So for me, there's 2 or 3 angles of looking at that piece.
Yeah.
So the first is looking at the research that the US Department of Defense did between the world wars.
Yeah.
On IQ testing. Yeah. And what makes a productive soldier. and although they've now outlawed doing IQ tests for employment,
yeah,
they basically run an IQ test and call it something else.
Yes.
But essentially, everybody with an IQ less than 80, there wasn't a role within the Department of Defense that somebody with an IQ less than 80 could be productive at.
Yeah.
Okay, well, how many people are there in the planet with an IQ less than 80? about
More
10%.
than you can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, so that's the first thing is,
Yeah.
you know, we're having this conversation in this conservative government of the UK at the moment of 100% employment. Well, if you've already got that in your mind that, you know, research done 100 years ago said that 10% of the population can't be productive to society. Now we can get into the stigma around that, but there was some research.
Okay.
So we can't get to 100% employment because already. Then we get into the conversation of labeling people and people giving up. Oh. So, you know, Matt Gutwill recently posted on LinkedIn. So after our recording with him, but he wrote a session about children that are kind of kicked to the curb because they've got a diagnosis and it's kind of the parent and the school's abdication to say, oh, well, they've got X condition, therefore, what's the point in investing in them? So that, for me, adds to that other conversation and ties back to your point of you end up with loads and loads of people who may be talented, but don't have their own self-belief that they can do it because for 20 years they've been told that they can't.
Absolutely.
Or, sadly, then, or societally, we don't think they can.
Correct.
So that's why I think, sadly, that there is a large proportion of neurodiverse people who are out of work or working on themselves or working for themselves or whichever other frame that you want to say,
working
have
by
a substantive job.
Yeah.
I went out to dinner with some NDers last night. And 3 or 4 of us around the table were like, I'm currently working for myself.
Yes.
What that means is I'm paying myself my savings whilst trying to do stuff that makes it look like I have a job.
Yeah, which is really sad. And, you know, I mean, I've been self-employed for the best part of 30 years. Okay. I know categorically that I am now unemployable. I've tried, I've been in employment, but I look at things so differently from what other people do. And the same with you and other people that are in this dyslexic, ADHD, autism world. We see things so much differently. And so when somebody's looking for a solution to a problem, we've already gone through the solution to the next solution, but know that we don't have almost the right to tell the manager, do this, because they'll go, oh, you're just stupid. Well, and then when they get to eventually to that solution, they'll go, oh, look how clever we are. You know, so that's why I've been self-employed, because I go and do my own thing, you know. And because one of the things that kind of does work, it works well, is as a consultant, going into companies talking about change leadership and change management. Because I'm a consultant and they're already paying me, they take my ideas, which if I was an employee, they wouldn't even acknowledge. So there is kind of that balance between the two. But it picking up back on your point about 100% employment, if they want to get to that, they've got to take all those things into consideration. And they've got to work on them, because if they don't, you know, Matt Hancock, for all the mistakes he's made, as a dyslexic, he's been trying to push this for ages. It's about time that the other, we can call them what you want, the people in government, start to acknowledge that he is onto something. Because when they acknowledge that he's onto something and don't ignore him and the thing around that he's talking about. Now, I'm not a Matt Hancock fan by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not a politician fan on any side of the aisle. But the sooner they start recognizing this, the sooner they'll start going, oh, hang on, Richard Branson, all these other guys, you know, Steve Jobs. Oh, hang on, maybe if we applied business the way they do, we might get somewhere.
And we're starting to see that in tech and professional services. So JP Morgan Chase came out and said, you know, in the first induction period, autistic staff were 48% quicker at onboarding than neurotypicals.
Yeah.
And there are so many jobs in tech at the moment for NDers because they tend to be quite fast thinkers and quite good problem solvers. So when it's like, you're an engineer and you need to fix a thing, being able to think through all of the options and come up with one is a good thing.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's all a little bit crazy about.
I think the problem there, Richard, is we as NDers, we recognize that, we understand that, but the people, and maybe the people at the top of the company, like I don't know, Chase or JP Morgan or whatever, they recognize it. So they're sitting at the top, but they're not the people actually doing the recruitment or going through the onboarding process and those that's the group that don't understand it, and so they are the barrier to that that growth and the employment opportunity. Now, if you had somebody that was neurodiverse running a specific project, and their job was they do all the interviewing for the neurodiverse people, hey, then you might be onto something.
Well, so put my HR hat on, because that's been my day, my day job for the last 8 years.
Yeah.
There's a conversation there about personal bias. So even if you have somebody who is an NDer recruiting, you've still got to manage their perception, bias, and judgments.
Oh, of course. But if you had them specifically doing the interviews that that only people with dyslexia, ADHD, autism attended, then they can't have any kind of bias, because they're just putting the information in as needed, but they are gaining it, they're gathering it in a way that they understand.
Yeah.
Whereas, so let's go to the HR thing, because I haven't had a huge amount to do with HR. I try to stay away from it as much as possible. But let's ask the question: who wrote HR policy?
Sadly, a middle-class white woman
who's probably not dyslexic, ADHD,
or
autistic.
Hasn't been allowed to express themselves, and are now probably 65 and thinking, maybe I should go and get a diagnosis, and then getting a diagnosis, and then realizing that they were probably also slightly different.
Possibly, but yeah.
But yes,
the point I think I'm trying to make is that typically those things, like the HR policy, the employment practice, that all those things are written for a neurotypical world by people who have a neurotypical understanding, and have, whether they are NDers or not, have been almost indoctrinated to understand things from a neurotypical perspective. And so what's the NDers percentage in the population? Hey, anything from 15 to 30%. That's a large percentage of the population. And just by writing it, even law. I mean, you look at law. Law is written by academics that is written for a neurotypical world, for a neurotypical understanding at like that grade. It's not written for us to understand. And so, I mean, I deal with I've got a number of clients who are dyslexic, ADHD, and solicitors. And they say they struggle to even understand what has been written and what the law looks like, because it's not written in a way that
it's digestible.
Yeah. Oh man, it's insane. So even that needs to change. And if we start with the HR policy needs to be written in a way that's neurotypical friendly, neurodiverse friendly, then the law should be written in a way that's neurodiverse friendly. So why not put all the law in plain English, write your HR policy in plain English, but put it in a video that we can read, or we can listen to, that we don't have to read. You know, I mean, I've got a document laying here in front of me, which is an HR policy from a client of mine. He sent it through to me and he said to me, Vic, I cannot understand what this is all about. He owns the company. It was written by his lawyer. He said, can you try and understand? I've got it laying in front of me. It is 77 pages.
That's about 72 long then.
Absolutely. Yeah. You are so right. And it's tiny writing. It's written, I think, in probably Arial 9.
Yeah.
I mean, how's anybody supposed to read it? You're an employee. You come into a job. And here you get this HR policy or handbook given to you. It's in this tiny writing. You can't understand it because it's written in legalese.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Oh, I'll just sign it because I need the job.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Well, on page 72, subsection 12, it says, don't be a dick.
Yeah. You've got to get there first. That's the problem.
Well, yeah, I've consulted with some, high street names.
Yeah.
And one of them's really good when it comes to their employee handbook. They don't have a lot of policies. Yeah. They've got an intranet where you can look up detail and stuff, but essentially you sign up to the handbook. Now the handbook is A5 and it's 30 pages. Yeah. But most of it is like diagrams and pictures of stuff. Yeah. And it walks you through, how you get paid, when you get paid. If you've got a problem about your deductions to your pay, then it talks about reasonable behaviors and, conduct and timeliness and then policies if you get told off, and then employee benefits. Yeah. So it's a nice, succinct, 4 or 5 pages per segment thing.
Yeah.
But the problem then comes, my old world was all about employee relations and what happens when things don't go to plan.
Yeah.
Well, the employee handbook doesn't say I can't do that.
Yes.
Well, hang on a second. Well, what does the actual policy say?
Yeah.
Oh, well, the actual grievance discipline resolution policy says 20 pages on its own as a policy.
Yes.
Yes, but your employee hasn't signed up to that policy. They've signed up to the handbook.
Yeah.
So I get why you've written the handbook in the way you've written the handbook, because it's really inclusive. It's really easy to get into. Now, I don't think they did a video or a read aloud function, but a 30-page A5 colorful cartoony thing is much easier to get into than 6 20-page documents as stuff. But I'm just waiting to hear that they're at employment tribunal for breach of contract because they're holding somebody to a standard that nobody agreed to.
Yeah.
But
that's so much of the problem. Yeah. One thing you just mentioned standard. I was doing a whole lot of research yesterday for one of my podcasts about memory and how memory works and all that sort of stuff, but also tied into how the brain works. And I was reading quite a fascinating thing. I think the date was 1885, something like that. A cylinder was created by a company in London to a very, very fine tolerance. That was then sent to France, and it was highly polished, and then it was put into these 3, sort of covered up with these 3 different bell jars, and it was sealed. And that measure is the international standard up until 2019. Is the international measure for 1 kilogram. Okay, so since 1885, right through until 2019, that thing was the standard against which every other standard was measured. But here's the thing. That's great for 1 kilogram or 100 kilograms or weight measurement, but there's no such standard for our brains.
Yeah.
We don't have a standard whereby we can say, go to Paris, take your brain, plug it into this machine, and it will tell you if you are standard.
Yeah.
There's no such thing. And yet we write policy, we write law, we write business cases, we write the way people should act and interact. All those things are written as if there is a standard to which everybody can be held in terms of their brain, the way they think, the way they act, the way they react. All those things, we write it as if there's a standard. But there is no standard. And so when you're writing an employment policy, you're writing a handbook, you're writing it for a standard which doesn't exist. And then you want to hold people to that standard, even though it doesn't exist. Now, we do have to have some framework within people in which people can operate, because it's within the context of a framework that we all feel safe. But if we define that framework, that standard, by a previously advantaged, if we can use that terminology, a previously advantaged set of people, then that set of people that have been previously disadvantaged, they can never get to that standard. So if you think of reading, writing, and spelling in school, okay, that standard of being able to read a certain amount of words by a certain age, that's a standard set to which really nobody can get to, because they either surpass it or they don't. But that's a standard set. By who? For who? Why was that standard set? So if, I mean, I didn't start reading properly until I was, I don't know, probably 9 or 10, and I still don't read well. I mean, I've got wonderful books lying behind me. I've got fantastic books here on my desk. A 200-page book could take me a year to read, simply because of reading and having to go back and go back and go back. Ah, that's what they're saying.
Welcome to Audible.
Audible is fantastic.
Hey, Audible, sponsor the podcast.
Awesome. But also, you know, like when I write emails, typing out for me is an absolute nightmare. So I speak them. So there's all those tools developed, but grammar, spelling, ability to read is set by a standard which we'll never get to. And that standard is set by, as I said, this previously advantaged group. We'll never get there.
All those standards are vague, or with assumptions within. So you know, dress professionally. So is this professional?
Yep.
Well, I haven't got a collar on my shirt. I haven't got a tie on. My shoes are polished, but
nobody can see them, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. You know, should it be suit trousers or chinos? But definitely not jeans. Yeah, but what happens if you're jeans and a sports jacket? Oh,
squeaky. Well, back to South Africa, obviously, because the weather was great all the time. I used to go and see my clients in a pair of shorts and flip-flops and a t-shirt, because that, to me, made me feel professional. But it also did not impact on the job that I did. If people perceived me as unprofessional because I came in shorts, then I didn't want to do business with them. But yeah, we get into a whole different topic when we're talking about. But again, it's the standards that are set. I was talking to a guy the other day. He works in a bank. I'm not going to mention the bank, but he works in a bank. And he is expected to wear a suit, tie, and polished shoes, black shoes, every day. And we were standing outside. He was busy having a fag, and I was just having a conversation with him because I've known him for quite a while. And we were talking about this whole thing of dress and what is acceptable dress for business. And he said, well, you know, this is acceptable dress for business. I said to him, okay, what is the difference between my jeans, which I'm wearing, and my very expensive shoes, which I've only got one pair of, and I've had them a long time, but my jeans and my very expensive pair of shoes, which are neat, they're tidy, and my shirt, my collared shirt, and the blazer I'm wearing, which is very kind of fashionable, Not that I'm a fashion conscious kind of bloke, but it's very fashionable and it looks good. Okay. What is the difference between that and the suit you are wearing, which you've obviously worn for a long time because it's shiny on the elbows? You can see the collar has been worn for ages because it's got little fray marks on it. And your trousers, which have been ironed probably the last time 5 years ago, because they've been washed, but they've been washed and just put on. Okay, they're supposed to not crease. And your shoes, which are polished, but have got huge holes in the bottom. You tell me which standard is the standard we need to apply to look professional in business. Standing with us was a guy who he dresses men for business. And his opinion was, as long as you feel comfortable, you feel professional, and your clothes are not in tatters, you're good to go. And I just thought, yeah, I can work with that. But again, it's breaking down those stereotypes which have been set according to that standard.
Well, and highlighting them. So one of my favorite clips, I'm a big movie guy.
Okay.
In Hidden Figures,
yeah,
one of the black women computers that get a job at NASA,
okay,
gets told off because they disappear for like 40 minutes, 2 or 3 times a day to go to the toilet.
Okay.
So I can't remember. But basically, the chief of the department calls her on it in front of the whole department. She's the only black person in the department.
Yeah.
I think she's the only woman, or I think there's like 2 secretaries and her, so she's the only like engineer, computer woman in the whole department. And he's like, "Where do you go?" And she was like, "Well, you don't understand the challenges that I have. I go to the bathroom. Well, why does it take you 40 minutes? Well, because there isn't a bathroom here for me. The bathroom round that corner is for white women only. So the only black female toilet there is a mile away on this other block.
Yeah.
So I need to walk there, go to the toilet and walk back. And sometimes it rains. And then I need to sort myself out as I come back. So I walk in here and don't look disheveled and stuff. And then your dress code says that I have to wear a skirt. Well, I've got a skirt. And I have to have my hair a certain way, and I could do that. And a string of pearls. What black woman in my stature in 1950s, 60s can afford a string of pearls? Yeah. I'm the breadwinner. I can't afford a string of pearls. Then looking at her colleagues and saying, we've got 2 coffee pots because you refuse to drink out of the same coffee pot as me. So I think there's a big, massive thing there about setting a standard, but also being cognizant of how inclusive that standard is. So
absolutely.
What actually happens is that the chief of the department finds a sledgehammer, goes to the toilet and knocks down all of the signs and said, "I don't care if you're a man, woman, black or white, there's a toilet."
Happy days.
and gets rid of the second coffee pot and says, "I don't care. Can we stop, bickering and having all of this
being facetious?"
Yeah, just because.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, 100 years ago, 80 years ago, 50 years ago was because of ignorance. It's
and ignorance is, so you obviously get some people that say ignorance is bliss, but actually ignorance is damaging.
Well,
to be honest.
I'm a big fan of Jimmy Carr, the comedian.
Yes.
He's written a recent book, and in it he refers a lot to quotes that have stood the test of time. Because if they've been around 200 years, then they're probably true. So he talks about a few, but 2 that sing to me are the Chinese proverb of "no less, sleep better," and the Western version, "ignorance is bliss." So I completely get that if you have less knowledge or less understanding, you have lower worries, so you're less stressed. I get that. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But that only works if your community is small. And if your community is big, then you need to be cognizant of everything else that's going on.
Absolutely.
And that ties back to your comment of sometimes not knowing is more harmful than knowing and not acting.
Correct. So obviously, having come from South Africa, I grew up during the apartheid years. And in hindsight, there were so many things that happened that none of us, and I mean practically no white person in South Africa actually knew were happening. Maybe if we'd asked a few more questions, we would have known, but remained ignorant. Maybe because of the questions we didn't ask. Maybe because ignorance was forced on us because it was kept secret. Maybe because maybe we didn't want to know. I don't know what the reasons are, but that kind of ignorance, that caused damage. That caused harm. The converse of that is, if we'd have had knowledge and understanding of some of those things that were going on, would we have changed things?
Yeah.
Big question. And the same is true right now. So many more people are becoming cognizant of neurodiversity and are saying, oh, we need to do this, we need to do that, but are not actually doing anything. So then it's better that you remain ignorant, because not doing anything, even though you have the cognition of it, is as bad as remaining ignorant.
Well,
yeah.
Is it worse? So
it could be.
Going back to the conversation we just had about organizations, people at the top of the tree being supportive of stuff, but it doesn't really happen low down the organization, and those middle managers being the barrier to change. Aidan Healy said something really poignant on a webinar a week or two ago, that line managers are the custodian of culture. So if those line managers aren't ND inclusive, then nothing's going to change.
Correct.
Now, what frustrates me is to hear that organizations and individual line managers hear that there is stuff going on, know that there are challenges of individuals, and then don't do anything about that.
Absolutely.
So somebody disclosing that they need accommodations, or they'd like some additional support, or just even coming out and saying, hey, this is a challenge for me. As a people manager, I want to have as good an understanding as I can reasonably achieve of what support that individual needs, so I can support them, because at the end of the day, their growth is my achievement, because it's my team, and their productivity will be team productivity. So me helping them do a good job makes me look good.
And that makes perfect sense.
Why wouldn't I do that?
Let me give you an example of something that happened the other day, and I've got the person's permission. I'm not going to mention names, but I've got the person's permission to share this. And it's actually a case study that I'm busy working on 3 books that I'm writing. We'll get to that in a second, but one of them is a book called Stories. You can go into any bookshop, WH Smith, whatever, and you can pick books off the shelves that tell you the story of the guy that climbed Mount Everest in his underwear, or walked across the Atlantic in a pair of cardboard shoes, or I'm exaggerating a little bit, but there are those kind of stories, sailed around the world on their own in a yacht. Great stories, inspirational stories, but I'm never going to do that. And so those stories are great to read, but really they don't, I can't probably relate to them in the same kind of way. Whereas the book I'm putting together is a book called Stories, and it's about individual people at my level, their stories in life. I came across a story of a lady in Ireland a little while ago who was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, I think it was, and she was told, motor neuron disease. And she was told that in 6 months' time, she'll be in a wheelchair. And she determined that she could change herself physiologically. She could change her mind, which could change her physique or physiology. And now I'm not saying this is the way it should be, but this was her story. And she started weightlifting. And 18 months after she was diagnosed and told she'll be in a wheelchair in 6 months' time, 18 months after that, she won a weightlifting competition for, I think it's called snatch and grab. I'm not the weightlifting kind of guy, so I don't really know.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think that's what it was called. She's busy writing up her thing at the moment. She won the island competition in that exercise in her weight category. 18 months after and that's a story we want to hear. So that's the kind of thing that's going into the book. But there's another story that I came across of this lady who is a lecturer at a university. She was promised, the university knows she's dyslexic, they know she's ADHD, and she was promised support, computer support, technology support, all that sort of stuff, by her one manager. That's in writing, it's in her file, and the finances were allocated for it. Then COVID happened. Okay, that was put on the back burner. Can't understand why it was put on the back burner, but she obviously had to work from home. She needed the support even more. No support, no support, no support, no support. Manager changed. New manager comes in, knows she's dyslexic, knows she's ADHD, has in her mind, a good understanding of what the conditions are. The lady goes into the office because now she's been told she's not working at the standard this new manager requires, and they need to facilitate things. She says to her new manager, look, these things were promised to me to help me so that I can produce at the level I need to produce at. Her new manager goes, no, I don't think you need those things. But anyway, if you need to talk to anybody, you can just come talk to me.
Well, you've just completely destroyed psychological safety and then expected somebody to come and see you.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, it's beyond me to comprehend that, number one, she hasn't taken the time to, as a manager, to go, okay, I've got this person who's dyslexic and ADHD. What is that? What are the complications of that? What are the additions to that? What are all the other things that knock onto that I need to understand? And then say, okay, now I understand it. Sorry, my dog is having she's in her deep sleep state and her little tail is wagging like crazy and it's in my island, sorry. But to understand this person, that I can help them to be as productive as they possibly can. Money's allocated, the facility's allocated. Let's get it done, because then I will look better and she will get it done. How she never thought of doing that, the Lord only knows.
Yeah, for me, that's the conversation about disabled aids and adaptations and reasonable adjustments and accommodations that anybody can have to be better at their job. So I don't know why people managers don't turn around and say, talk to me about your ways of working. What could you do, or what could I support you with to be better at doing what you do? Yeah. And it doesn't matter.
The problem is they just don't take the time, Richard. They just don't take the time.
So I had a very interesting conversation last night because I was having dinner with 8 NDers. For me, I like the phrasing of accommodations. Yeah. Because it can be neurotypical language. It doesn't have to be divergent language.
No, it doesn't.
If you like to work, if you like to be quiet when you focus, then that isn't an ADHD or autistic trait. That could be anybody who wants to be quiet while they focus. Fantastic. Yeah. So speaking to people about, I asked for this accommodation, I got this accommodation, but then they offered it to everyone, and now I feel upset that they've offered it to everyone. Well, but you've got what you needed.
Absolutely, that's all.
Comparison is the thief of joy. Just be happy that you've got what you needed. Yeah. But I think there's a massive conversation there about taking time, and that gets back into the other conversation of how many people waste time at work by going off and having conversations with people at work. And I was like, well, I've been in psychologically safe workplaces, HR, employee relations, employee engagement for the last 8 years. How much of the time you spend walking over to talk to a colleague is wasted? Now you might not be the most efficient or productive at doing the thing that your manager might want you to do, but part of doing that thing is building and maintaining interpersonal relationships that need time. You need to have those conversations to build those relationships.
Absolutely.
They don't build. So one of my colleagues that from the organization I've just left was there before I started and is still there. I've probably only spoken to him in 8 years, I don't know, 12 or 15 hours.
Wow. Because
he worked in a different department. We didn't really have any reason to talk to each other. So it was time for me to move on. And he was like, yeah, cool. All right, see you later, bye. Okay.
Happy days.
And then there's people that I've worked with for like 6 months, but I was in their team with them all day, every day, in tears because I'm going. And I'm like, well, that's because relationships need time. And it's not just about going and asking for the work ask. I was in a commercial function, and then we had an operations and delivery function. A couple of people in the operations delivery function have quite a good rapport with me, and some don't. Well, then you realize that those people who don't tend to be those that you haven't invested time in.
Absolutely.
So it was it was either Churchill or Abraham that said, I don't like that guy, I must spend some time to get to know him better.
Who said that? I don't know, but I heard it.
But it was a famous old politician.
That describes many people.
it does. It reminds me of that the meme of Ben Kenobi and Luke, and in the background is whichever political establishment that you want to put. And so Ben Kenobi going, "You've never seen a greater hive of scum and villainy." But actually, it was Isley, but they've green screened it.
Yes. Yes. I like that. So just to go back to the point you were making earlier about productivity and the way people work and that sort of thing. One of the things that I've done, and it's something that I share with a lot of people and with clients that I work with. So obviously, you know what a circadian rhythm is. That's your 24-hour cycle. There's another component to that, which is the smaller time frame called an ultradian cycle, which is sort of 90 minutes to 120 minutes long. And if you think of that in terms of most people with neurodiverse conditions, focus for long periods of time is a challenge. Unless you get into the kind of hyper-focused space, that's a different thing altogether. But typically, and the most days, people struggle to focus on their job or focus on one particular thing. And so I've come up with this way of working that works for me, and I know it works for a lot of other people. But I break that 90 minutes up into 20-minute and 10-minute segments. So focus for 20 minutes. I use a Pomodoro clock on my computer. So focus for 20 minutes. The Pomodoro clock rings. Take 10 minutes off to do something completely different. Go and grab a cup of coffee. You were talking just now about building relationships. Maybe I'll go and have a conversation if I was in an office space with a colleague. I actually implemented this on a shop floor in a company up in Stoke, which was a foundry. We implemented this for in fact, the whole shop floor. But focus for 20 minutes, then take a 10-minute break. Completely different, do something else, go and read your emails, whatever. Come back, another 20 minutes focus, take 10 minutes break, 20 minutes again, and then take a long break. And the productivity level just goes through the ceiling because most of us can focus for 20 minutes. If you can focus for 20 minutes, you'll be amazed at how much you get done. But what happens is that, and being ADHD, and you'll recognize this, you're busy working with something and the screen flashes up. Oh, you got email. Oh, I got email. Let me go check email. And, it's sort of flicking all over the place, and you think you're multitasking, but really you're not.
Well, so there was some research from Stanford University back in the 70s, I think, on multitasking.
Yeah.
And there's no such thing as multitasking.
No. No such thing. Totally agree with you.
It's the ability to change between focus quickly.
Yeah, switching.
So they were looking at airline pilots, and it was like, well, how can you fly a plane, communicate, so aviate, navigate, communicate? How can you do all of those at the same time? You don't.
No.
What you do is you make sure that you're flying straight and level.
Yep.
And then you make sure you're going in the right direction.
Yep.
And then you go, hey, control tower, I'm going this way. That's three different things. That's not all at once. That's distinct things. And I've got in the habit of trying to turn off notifications for stuff. So now we're recording. My phone's on silent. It's turned upside down. I can't see the screen. I don't have Outlook open. So the only disturbance I get is when the room lights up, like it might have done 10 minutes ago, when my wife walks in to show me something that's come from Amazon today. And I'm like, cool, I'm recording. And then she walks away and calls me moody. I was like, well, I'm recording. But then I'll get back and I'll have 20 WhatsApp messages, 5 emails, and 2 missed calls, and then I'll worry about that when the time comes. But
when you worry about it, but that's another focus segment, isn't it? You focus on the call
stuff.
I'm exactly the same. My phone is off. Well, phones are off that way. They both are ring. There's nothing on any of my computer screens. We can focus. When we close this down, I can go back to focusing on those. But then in that space, I'll go, okay, let me deal with the phone calls. Deal with that, go and do something else. Come back, deal with the emails. To be honest with you, a lot of people, I've got to deal with the email now. Well, actually not. How many emails are that important that if you don't respond in that instant, you're going to lose your biggest client, or somebody's going to die for want of a better way of describing it. There's nothing that's going to be that drastic that an email needs to be responded to prevent that from happening. And the same is true. How many phone calls do you get every day? Now you're in a different situation. Your father's in hospital. You would want your phone on, and if it rings, you'd want to take that call, irrespective of what else you're doing. So there are those exceptions. But how many other phone calls are you expecting today where somebody's going to phone you and say, hey, Richard, I'm going to
here's 25 grand, do some work.
Well, yes, take that call. Take that call, please. Tell this dumb South African to bugger off. But you know what I'm saying? Pretty much most of the things can be dealt with in an hour's time, or half an hour's time, or even 20 minutes time.
Or even a day or so. So I'm doing some work with a European institution.
Yep.
And they were like, hey, we'd like to set up another call.
Yeah.
It's amazing how you have meetings for meetings and meetings and meetings. But anyway, we'd like to set up
meetings to have a meeting so that you can decide when you're going to have a meeting.
Yeah. And then getting the minutes from that meeting, and then having a meeting after the meting about what we're going to do about the minutes from the meeting. Anyway, so that was Wednesday last week, I think it was.
Okay.
And they were like, so on Friday they were like, when are you? So Wednesday they said, we'd like to have another call. When are you free? And I was like, Monday, as in yesterday, or Friday this week.
Yep.
So I got an email this morning, and I was like, so I assumed that yesterday wasn't available for you. And we're now looking at booking in the middle of November. So because when you've got 8 people as stakeholders, trying to find an hour between 8 people's diaries is just mad.
It's a nonsense.
But me responding quickly and snappily on Wednesday got us nowhere. So now we're looking at, I think it's like 15th of November or something. It's just all a little bit bonkers.
Yeah, so I'm doing a little bit of work for also a European institution based in a non-English speaking country. But it's through a third party. Yeah. So they want to set up a meeting They contact the third party who contacts me. I've got to then reply to the third party who contacts them, and we have a meeting. And this happened 2 weeks ago as well. They sent an email to my third party, who sent me an email saying, these guys have requested an urgent meeting. So I replied within an hour of getting the email. Okay, I'm available here, here, and here. That was 2 weeks ago. I got an email yesterday saying, can we do these dates? I'm like, what happened to 2 weeks ago when it was an urgent meeting? Anyway, yeah. Meetings about meetings so you can have a meeting. I love it.
I get that. So, when did you get your diagnoses of dyslexia, ADHD?
I was 47 when I was diagnosed with dyslexia.
Yep.
And 53 when I was diagnosed with ADHD. So yeah, for most of my life, I've lived with these things, not knowing what they were, but knowing that there was something completely different and odd. And
yeah,
I think probably most people thought weird, but hey, they can think what they like, can't they?
so you were you were working for yourself before you realized why that chimed well with you.
Oh yeah. So I started my first business when I was 13. Went to the military when I was 16, stayed there 6.5 years. Came out the military as a qualified motor mechanic, excuse me, among other things that you can do in the military. And then went and worked in a restaurant. So I spent 3.5 years working in a restaurant as first a chef, then a manager. And it was while I was doing that as the manager, I had staff to work with, that I realized this is just, there's something different in the way I work, the way I see things, the way I perceive things. Just creating menus. I'd come up with these menus and the chef would go, you want me to do what? That should be simple. So it was then that I started to realize there's a big difference in the way that I think compared to the way other people do. And so my very next thing was when I left the restaurant, I started my second business as a motor mechanic doing motor car repairs and that sort of stuff. And then since then I've had 9 businesses in total, 7 of which were wildly successful. One was an unmitigating disaster. And yeah, right now the 9th business, we're just looking to see how that's going to pan out, over the next few years. So yeah, that's kind of how it's happened. And yeah, as you say, I became self-employed before I actually got an official diagnosis. Yeah, it's I think so many people know that there's something different, but are scared to go and get diagnosed. In fact, I was having this conversation with somebody the other day, and he went, I know he's dyslexic. He knows it. I know he's ADHD. He knows it. And his words to me was, Vic, I don't want to go and get diagnosed because then I have a label. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I get that. But that label can become the thing that actually empowers you. And this is another kind of mission that I'm on, is to say to people, don't get diagnosed. Because once you have a clear understanding of, yes, this is a reality, now I can leverage off that. Not use it as an excuse for failure, but leverage off it to guarantee success. And I think that's the two kind of levers we have. Some people use it as, oh, I can't read, so therefore I can't be successful. I know many lawyers, accountants, professors that are dyslexic and ADHD. And I know a bunch that are autistic. But by the same token, you could use that as the lever to go, okay, now I have a diagnosis. It's clear, it's understandable. I don't have to be ashamed of it. Let me use that as the lever that guarantees my success and grow off that. So, yeah, that's kind of how I see it.
I'm still torn because I think that a lot of that there is a lot of stigma around boys with ADHD and autism,
particularly of a certain age. You know, if you the older you are, because of the history, the more susceptible you are to the stigma. But yes, there is still a stigma attached for pretty much everyone. Yeah.
So I think the stigma's starting to move because there's far more women in the space.
Yeah.
And you know, women's presentation of ADHD is significantly different to men's.
Absolutely.
Well,
it is.
Impulsion looks different. But you know, I interviewed my old boss as one of our first episodes.
Yeah.
And you know, her guidance was to also seek an autism spectrum diagnosis.
Yeah.
And at the end of the interview, she's like, "But I don't want to be autistic." Well, because you've given yourself that stigma, and you're restricting yourself because of the stigma that you've perceived. You know, I don't want to have ADHD. Now, you know, I have a list of acronyms as long as my arm, but you know, on Amy's episode that I'm just editing now.
Yeah.
We got into the conversation of, you know, if you had a magic wand, would you choose not to have ADHD?
Yeah.
And she wrote a LinkedIn post recently, I think it was the last couple of days, about it. And so, well, you know, on one hand, you know, I'd like to be less forgetful. I'd like to, you know, remember to keep in touch with my friends and family, you know, but at the same time, what I have has got me to where I am now.
Absolutely.
And if I didn't have my long list of acronyms, would I be me?
Yeah.
Well, that's a deep
I think
philosophical question.
It is a deep philosophical question, but here's my perception, my way of looking at it. I've got an MBA with a major in economics. Okay. But that doesn't define who I am. Just as little as dyslexia or ADHD define who I am. See, it's not the label, it's not the title that defines who you are. It's your perception of yourself and your ability to live a life that is a life of what I call possible, that defines who you are. See, the way you think about yourself defines who you are. The way you talk about yourself defines who you are. The way you talk about other people defines who you are. All those things, my MBA, my dyslexia, my ADHD, they contribute, but they don't define. So for me, it's my background, my history. The fact that my father was a complete and utter dick does not define me. It's a contribution, but it doesn't define me. My perception, the way I understand those things, the way I use those things, all make me who I am. And if I define who I am in that way, I can then define how I change into the future to become who I want to become. But if I let an MBA define me, if I let dyslexia define me, if I let ADHD define me, then I become that thing and I become finite. Rather than my ability is infinite. I may not achieve that. I may die before then, but there's a possibility that I can grow into this person that I want to be. And that is infinite. So, yes, it is a deep philosophical question, but I think the simplest answer is that none of those things, including my past, define me. today. They contribute. But I define myself by my self-perception and the way in which I communicate that. So if I perceive myself to be, I'm no good at reading, writing, and spelling, then that's what I'll be, no good at reading and writing and spelling. It's a contribution, but then it allows me, if I understand it as a contribution to who I am, then it allows me to grab other things that allow my spelling, writing, and reading to improve. And therefore, they can no longer define me. So, yeah, that's my kind of my take on it. And I try to help people instill within their own minds what I call the life of possible, rather than the life of probable. So the life of probable says I'm defined by my past, I'm defined by my career, I'm defined by other people's perceptions of me. That's probable, because it probably will happen. But I'm going, hang on, let's live a life that is possible. What is the life that's possible? That's determined by me, what I could possibly do. How far could I possibly push the edge of this envelope? How far could I possibly grow my business? How far could I possibly build my relationships with other people? How deep can I possibly think about these great philosophical questions? How possible is it that I can influence not just my world, but the world? All those things are possible if we allow ourselves to be defined not by those things, not by the contributing factors, but by that overarching thing of me. So, yeah.
It's very poignant, and I'm going to spoil it with two movie quotes. So
yes.
The first is Spock saying that everything is possible, but highly improbable.
Yes.
Yes. And Batman's, which was something along the lines of, it's not what you say, but your actions that define you.
Yep.
And that's why I do charity work. That's why I do pro bono stuff.
Yeah.
Because hopefully the karma of the universe will return some of that one day.
Absolutely. But now, here's what I want to encourage you to do, Richard. Your action is doing charity work. Okay. You get a result from that. You feel good, other people feel good, yada, yada, yada. Okay. However, your definition of you did not start with you doing the action. Your definition of you started with one step further back, and that was the habit. You had to get into the habit of taking those actions that make that charity possible. But it actually started with a step further back than that, and that was your attitude. If you did not have the right attitude, you wouldn't develop the right habit, which wouldn't develop the action that delivers the result that you're getting.
Yeah.
And if you go a step even further back than that, it started with your thoughts. So it's not your actions that define you. It's actually your thoughts that define you.
Yes, but Batman said it, so therefore it's worthwhile.
How can we not agree with Batman?
It was the learning cycle of intent, feedback, and behavior feeding itself. So actually, if you've done something, the feedback of that may change your intent to change. If you change your intent, your behavior will change, which means that you'll get different feedback.
Absolutely.
So I get that, and my upbringing is in Jungian and Carl Rogers needs-based psychology. So everything everybody does is selfish. I don't care, Mother Teresa. She did it because she had a sense of love, connection, community, giving values to others, which upheld her needs. The fact that she didn't make any money from that,
it's irrelevant.
Money's a social construct, guys. There are people that live without money. There are people that live without trade, just not in the Western world. But no, Vic, it's been an awesome hour or so.
Over an hour.
Is there anything? Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't had a chance to?
No, I don't think so. I think the only thing is that I want to really encourage people that are dyslexic, ADHD, have dyscalculia, any of those sort of things on the autism spectrum, to start believing in themselves and not in the environment around them. Because, like I said earlier, if you learn to believe in you, then you learn to believe in possible. But if you don't have faith in yourself, it's often said, oh, you need faith. Well, I'm not talking about a religious faith, because religious faith even goes deeper than just the religion itself. It goes to the faith in you. I think that's the first thing that I would say is every one of us needs faith in ourselves. Faith to be able to do the job we do. Faith to be able to share this thing that's in our head, this great vision, whatever it is, to be able to share it. Faith that we can not just get through the day, but faith that we can get from the day. So many people just go, oh, gee, if I could just get through today. No, don't get through today. Get from today. Learn the lessons of the day and make tomorrow better. All those kind of things, I think, are so important for us as the neurodiverse community to learn. I think that's the first thing. And the second thing is, man, make your life what you want to make it and enjoy the thing. It's the only one you're going to get. Enjoy the thing. If you come back in as a cow at some point, you probably won't know now that you're going to come back as a cow. So just enjoy this thing that you've got today. Enjoy every day. Make every day valuable. Make every day what you can do. And lastly, just be kind. Be kind. Be kind. If people are ugly to you, if they're rude to you, if they're horrible to you, just be kind. And I think that's probably the only things that I would say, aside from the fact, if you want to get a hold of me, I'm on LinkedIn, all over LinkedIn like a cheap suit.
Or a really expensive pair of shoes.
Inexpensive. Yes. You could go down that road. Yeah. Very well worn, expensive pair of shoes.
Maybe a conversation for another time. But I think the definition of kindness is changing.
Oh, yes. It changed during COVID, and it's changing again.
Well, I think there's more of a social justice angle on kindness now.
Yep.
So I'm more attuned to benevolence than kindness.
Yep.
Because sometimes you need to be cruel to be kind. Well,
yes.
Yeah, that doesn't necessarily chime well with the new definition of kindness.
Yeah, but when you say sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind, I don't think you have to destroy a person to be cruel.
Yeah,
to be kind. You can build up, you can encourage while telling that person what they did was wrong.
Yeah.
While being there was a book written some years ago that was, I can't remember who wrote it, but it said its title was something along the lines of in order to show love well, show toughness better. And the premise of the book was you need to know where the line in the sand is, and then show love when people cross that line. Show love, show care, show compassion, but don't let them cross the line. So I get that. Yeah,
no, there was a post probably 6 months ago that I saw that was like, 5 steps to kindness. And it was like, never say anything that'll offend someone. And I'm like, no, hang on a minute. I can interact with you with benevolence, with a level of compassion, with the intent to not cause harm. But just because you're offended by it doesn't mean that I'm wrong.
Exactly. 100% agree with you. I had this conversation with somebody the other day, and we probably do need to wrap this up. But I had a conversation with somebody the other day about politics, and they were adamant that their political viewpoint was the only one to have, and that anybody else who didn't have that political viewpoint was stupid and irrelevant and had nothing to contribute. And I was going, hang on, wait a minute. what about the person that's opinion is different to yours? So they now become stupid, irrelevant, and have nothing to contribute, while they are still a human being. I think when I say kindness, be kind to people, I start from the position, if I cut myself open and I cut you open, we bleed the same red stuff. That makes us human. Right, let's start from there. We start from the place of we are both human. Then I understand that the things I say and the things you say may contradict each other. We may not always agree on everything, but because we see each other as human beings, we're starting from the place of respect. I respect you as a human. You respect me as a human. If I say something that offends you, that's your offense. Don't project it back on me. Hold that thing and let's remain friends. Let's remain humans. And for me, that's where kindness starts, is at that very base level. We're both humans. Let's treat each other well. Treat each other well doesn't mean that I'm not going to say things that contradict you. Doesn't mean that I'm not going to say things that offend you. Doesn't mean I'm going to say things that you totally and utterly disagree with. But what it says, we're starting from that position of human. I treat you well. My intention is to be honest and have integrity and share with you the things that I feel are relevant. If they don't agree with you, they don't go down with you well, that's okay. We stay human and we treat each other well.
Yeah.
My basic philosophy of life.
And that's when I know that an argument on the internet is done, is when somebody calls somebody a name.
Yeah.
It's like, look, if you don't have any more facts and logic to share, and, well, you're a bigot.
Yeah.
I'm out. See you later.
Yeah. Absolutely. And hence my comment yesterday, or my post yesterday on LinkedIn, which said, be kind. In fact, it said, today, be kind. A few lines below, it said, if you can't do that, then shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is a family show, but
it's not. I'll just mark it not for kids.
Then just shut up.
Yeah.
That's how you be kind. If you can't be kind, then just shut up, because you are showing kindness. Simple.
Well, and that goes back to, that whole thing of, quotes that stand the test of time. If you haven't got anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think that should be reframed to say, if you haven't got anything valuable to say.
Yes, but then we get into a conversation of who deems what's valuable.
It's valuable to you. If I say something that I think is valuable, then it's valuable. If you don't agree with it, that's okay.
Yeah.
But it's back to that whole thing of treating each other as human beings.
Yeah.
Anyway, here we go.
Fantastic, Vic. It's been awesome having you on.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate your time.
Hopefully we can chat again soon.
Heck yes.